Yes, my name is Maxwell Salzberg, and with three of my friends, I started a project called Diaspora. So I'm here to tell you about it today. And so there's three things I'm just going to go over. Hopefully, I won't talk too fast. I'm kind of really nervous, so you're going to have to bear with me. So first, I just kind of want to give a brief overview of Diaspora. Maybe some of you have heard about it and whatnot. I'll also kind of tell the story, I guess, from my side of it. It's kind of a crazy little fairy tale story, so people like to kind of hear it. But the thing I actually want to talk to you guys about is about making stuff. I think it's a really important thing about not just what we've made and how we're sort of embodying it and what we're doing, but that we think that hopefully inspires other people to make stuff. Maybe it has nothing to do with Diaspora. But, and then hopefully there's some time for Q&A because I'll probably talk way too fast and go through it way too fast. So just really quickly about me. I'm 23 years old. I studied computer science and media studies at New York University. That's a picture of me with my mom. Mom, everybody. So Diaspora is an open source distributed social network. What does that mean in totally non-nerd jargon? It's different people friending, following, messaging, and sharing with each other on different websites. So the thing that my friends and I were sort of worried about when we started the project is that the place that controls your social graph controls how you share. That basically means that because your whole friend graph is on Facebook, they kind of define like what sharing is. It's likes, it's photo albums, it's events, it's this very sort of standard set of things. And what's kind of really weird about that is that regardless of who you are and how you like to share, it's the same experience. It's really one experience for everybody. If you're old, young, a man, a woman, green, blue, white, black, it's all the same. So we kind of think that separating the social graph and the mode of sharing puts the users in control and allows for more innovation on the web. We think if more applications and more websites online sort of could use your social graph with your permission, if you can kind of take your social graph everywhere you went with you, the applications could sort of compete on how cool they helped you share things or the cool things they helped you create, not the fact that your friends are already there, so you have to use it. We're not the only project doing this. We're certainly not even the only open source projects doing this. This is also not an exhaustive list, but we're not the only people. We just sort of have this bizarre story, and I think we're making really good strides. But and it's worth saying too, a lot of these projects really we're working with, and a lot of really smart people. But Diaspora is an open source project. It's also been really popular. So the thing that actually kind of blows my mind is we've only been an open project for 6 months, but we're already in the top 2% of all free software projects. That's got a stat from a place called Black Duck Software. We have 100 unique contributors, not counting our translations. It's been translated into 32 languages. We have like 15 contributors with commit access. Those are people who've sort of contributed multiple meaningful contributions. And we're the 6th most popular project on GitHub, which is a code-sharing website. I'm not sure how popular it is in Germany, but as an ecosystem, we're still in alpha. I mean, this is still kind of the early days. Again, we'll kind of get to the story, but everybody heard about it before we had, released anything, which is kind of weird. But in sort of this alpha phase, it's still a really healthy project, and we'll be moving out of alpha closer to the end of the year, and you'll be hearing about this a lot more. There's actually a bunch of German kids who run a relatively large installation. You can go check it out. It's software. It runs. It communicates with the server we run and server people all over the world run. So the idea is you can have an account on any one of these, but you can friend and follow and talk to anybody, whoever you want, no matter where they are. And so it's a working thing. It is also a work in progress. I liked the way that if you guys saw Mitchell Baker speak yesterday, I like the way that she kind of laid out that we're still figuring it out to a certain degree, but we have to sort of get something out there to kind of understand how it works, because a distributed social graph, it's not going to look just like Facebook. It's going to allow us to do different things. It's going to allow us to do new things, and we kind of have to reinvent some of the metaphors, and that doesn't necessarily happen overnight. It happens with people using it and giving feedback and contributing in all sorts of different ways. So really quickly, just if you really are interested in the project, this is just some places to go to. This is not the end of my presentation. So if you can check out the code if you're hacker type. If you like IRC, you can hang out with us there. We always love bug reports if you happen to have a user account and our mailing list. But so our backstory, and maybe perhaps you guys know about this, but like a lot of good stories, it starts with our hideout. And so the four of us, my partners, Ilya, Raphael, Daniel, and I, we were all in ACM at NYU, which is basically just like computer science nerd club. And you know, it's basically a 40 square meter office where you would find, you know, 8 computer science undergrads at any given night, all working on sort of random little projects and little hacks and certain things. And you know, it's general kind of nerd debauchery things kind of going on. And we all met actually building a MakerBot 3D printer, which is a pretty cool thing. It's a do-it-yourself kind of kit to print three-dimensional objects. It's pretty neat. But so we sort of got into this habit of, like, we had like a weekend project always that you know, we were always working on. And about the time we were finishing the MakerBot, and you know, we were kind of like looking for a new project. Like, what are we going to do? Like, you know, we like staying here until ungodly hours in the night doing work, which is kind of weird. But about that time, we saw a talk by a man named Eben Moglen. He gave a talk by the name of Freedom in the Cloud. You can Google for it. Actually, it's a really good talk, and I'm going to really like reduce it to one sentence, which doesn't really do it justice. But you know, his basic thing that I think rang true with us is that, you know, we give up a lot to all of these services when we get a free account on Facebook or at Google or whatnot, and sort of the cost of what they're giving you, it doesn't really like amount to much of anything. So why do we give up anything? And I think the single line that really rang true with me is, if we think this is not cool and is not the way that the internet should work, if we're technologists, why haven't we fixed it yet? Why isn't there a solution? It's kind of really weird. Even as nerds, there's not really a good place to go and things you can do in order to sort of get away from this. And being just sort of kids who like to play with technology, we were sort of saying like, that sounds like pretty hard, pretty fun, and let's just see how hard it is. Let's just give it a shot. And you know, it's a good opportunity to stay in on a Friday night and order pizza and hang out with your friends. So we kind of started working on the problem, and you know, we just started prototyping and doing crazy things that may or may not have worked and whatnot. And it miraculously held our attention for a week, and then a month, and then 2 months. And at some point, we said to each other, like, this is awesome. Like, maybe we can work on this summer, and like, just, you know, maybe people on the internet would maybe be interested in contributing to, you know, having 4 guys work on this and, you know, get the equivalent of ramen money. So the idea was, you know, 4 guys, 4 months, $10,000. We make how much ever open source software we can make in that amount of time, and we release it, and anybody can use it, and it's going to be really cool. So if you're not familiar with Kickstarter, it's a crowdfunding website where anyone around the world can sort of give you donations, and if you make your goal, you get all the money. If you don't, nobody gets charged or whatnot. So we really only sent it out to a bunch of friends. Actually, the night before our project went live, Daniel and I had a really like yelling conversation about whether we should ask for $8,000 or $10,000. And eventually I won, and we asked for $10,000. And so we really only sent it out to a few of our friends. A few of us like, hey, you like the internet? Like, we're doing this thing. We're trying to raise money so we can make you know, software to help enable distributed social networking. Maybe you're interested in it. And all of a sudden, the tweets started kind of pouring in from people we knew, and then people we didn't know started retweeting it. And then all of a sudden, there started to be blog articles about it. And then people like the EFF started tweeting about it, which was basically like a huge nerd dream of ours. And then the day I graduated college, this happened, which is this is my ugly mug on the front page of the New York Times website. And this day was actually really crazy. It was the day I actually graduated college, too. So it was a pretty big day. But when it was all said and done, over 6,500 people gave us over $200,000, which is over 2,000% of what we actually asked for. Another kind of funny thing, at least about this picture, is this isn't the picture they actually took. This was the picture they took. Actually, Daniel had thought that the oldest, probably dumbest, most profane Unix joke you can come up with would be really funny about 3 months before. And that had actually been on the chalkboard, but I won't read it aloud, but I think Dan Grippy may go down in history as the only person to drop 3 Fisk bombs in the Gray Lady. So we were kind of proud of that. All right, tough crowd. But yeah, and you can kind of see it's pretty interesting. And there really was no trick. We really just got really lucky. But that big spike is the day the New York Times article ran in terms of how. So if you ever were wondering how much getting on the front page of the New York Times could help whatever you're doing, it's about that much. So again, the project we finished in June. We actually ended up moving out to San Francisco. We were based in New York, and a place called Pivot. Many people emailed us from all over the world saying that they were so excited for the project and how could they help and how could they contribute. And we were kind of just freaking out because this thing that we were doing in our office and in the dark by ourselves was for some reason just sort of taking the internet over by storm. One of those people who emailed us was Pivotal Labs, which is a software consultancy in San Francisco that's pretty cool. They offered us a couple of free desks, so we said, like, yes, please. We would love to come out. So we moved out to San Francisco, and what has happened since then? I mean, it was June of last year, and really it was all just hard work and learning. I mean, that's the real truth of making some technology is you got to spend the time and work on it. And so a lot of people say, like, oh, it's been really quiet. I haven't heard that much. It's like, well, that's because we're working really hard on making it awesome. So in September of last year, we open sourced our code. In November, we kind of have a private alpha, as I previously mentioned. And it's been going really good. And I'm excited to say that in the next, not committing, but next like 3 to 4 months, you're going to hear a lot more about Diaspora because we're going to sort of do a really big push to sort of get it out there once we think that we're sort of in that beta phase. So I'm really excited about that. But I do kind of actually, I want to talk about something that I guess I've learned. That was kind of the primary reason why we started it, is because we're kind of curious guys and we wanted to make something, obviously something that would help everybody, but we kind of wanted to make it for ourselves. We wanted to see if we could do it. We wanted to see if we could solve the problem. We wanted to have fun with our friends. So, I guess one thing I do want to talk about is about making stuff. And talking about really big ideas and big concepts is an awesome thing because we all love the internet and we all love thinking about what it can do for people. And these big ideas is what makes conferences like Republica possible. It's definitely a good thing, but I actually get a little antsy when I'm sort of talking about it too much because I get antsy that I'm not actually making something and trying to implement these ideas and see if they actually work rather than just talking about it. So what I really wanted to share kind of are these things that I've learned in the past 9 months about making things and what I kind of hope that Diaspora for some people is not necessarily like, I mean, I want people to think it's amazing and I want it to work really well and I want it to be really cool, but for me, a huge part of our success will be someone who's maybe like me or maybe more unsure and saying, hey, there was a guy that had an interesting idea and then he did something about it. He made something cool, and like, why can't I do that? Why can't I make a cool, crazy thing? And I think, to me, that's kind of what makes the internet go around, is people with weird, crazy ideas going off and actually making something, and it's amazing how it can change the world, something very simple. Just, I guess, a disclaimer, too, is a lot of these things I probably cribbed from somewhere else, and where I remembered where they came from, I was sure to annotate them. But I actually think, I hope that you forget that I say them and internalize them and make them your own, because it's not really about who said it. It's about, I guess, like feeling it. So the first thing maybe sounds kind of dumb, but find something you love and then do that. This is maybe kind of directed at some of my non-technical peers, maybe, who aren't necessarily here, but it's definitely an important thing. Is, you aren't like too cool to get excited about something you love. You're not, too cool to not totally go for the thing you want to be doing. I sort of, in New York, I have a lot of friends who are like, oh yeah, like I want to be a filmmaker, but I'm a waiter. And like, oh, I want to, I want to be an artist, but I just work in a gallery. And all of these things that I kind of get a little bit frustrated about them because it's like, you should be what you want to be first and then sort of figure out how to make it happen. And, that's maybe easy for me to say. I'm a very lucky guy that, computer programming is one of these weird things that if you're sort of obsessed with it, it has the nice side effect that you can probably find a way to figure out how to make it happen. But it wasn't actually even that easy for me. I think actually sort of how I came to it partially is actually Biela Coleman, who spoke yesterday about the lulls, and Anonymous actually was my thesis advisor at NYU. I was writing my thesis on Ruby hackers in comparison to other open source hackers. Without going into it too much, Ruby hackers are really weird in comparison to other free software hackers. And so since Biela was sort of a software hacker anthropologist, I was kind of doing a sort of sub-study of Ruby hacker anthropology. And basically what I learned is that I'm a terrible anthropologist, and that ultimately I cared more about what these people were talking about and the actual technical discussions than I did actually sort of the subtext of what it meant that they were talking about it. And I ended up basically programming when I was supposed to be writing my thesis. And I actually never finished my thesis, and it's something that's I'm pretty kind of shameful about. But this was all happening when Diaspora was happening, so I sort of like just never did it. But it's because I found something that I think attracted me more to what I was doing. So sorry, Biela, I didn't finish, but I'm maybe a little bit happier now than writing my thesis. Another thing that was really important that I learned in Diaspora and also in another class, start with the simplest thing that works. When you're making something, you need to figure out whether your solution, one, means anything to people, or two, actually solves a problem you're trying to solve. But sometimes you'll be really surprised that something that's way simpler than what you imagined would have to work could do. I think a good example, this is a course I took, a man named Dennis Shasha. He is a professor of computer science at NYU, and he was also wrote the Scientific American Puzzle column for a while. But this is a class that brings even the most grizzled of computer science students to tears every week. It's a class where you basically, in game form, are forced to write an algorithm that attempts to solve an unsolvable problem every week. And he makes it a game where all the students' algorithms compete against each other, and whichever one does the best wins. So these are insanely hard problems that don't actually have definitive answers. There's not like one right solution ever, and it's all about letting the computer take a really, really good guess at a hard problem. But the thing he always said was, you always want to start with the dumbest solution you can think of, because any solution, and many times, is better than no solution. In fact, every time. And it was actually really interesting, because in some of these weeks, everybody would have tried something really complicated, and nobody did the completely obvious thing, and therefore nobody won the competition that week. So it just goes to show you that sometimes things that you don't think will work can work, and certainly you can make them better, but you have to see that it totally fails. Another way to kind of think about this is, I guess this is kind of maybe a San Francisco lingo joke, but not the entire internet is Ruffle scale, which I guess is kind of like, a lot of these big companies say, oh, these huge problems for the internet are all about enormous data sizes and doing everything in 5 milliseconds, and it needs to be scaled to 1 billion users the day it exists. And I think that that's actually kind of bogus when you're thinking about it from, what can I do? I mean, if you think about it, Twitter at its core is 140 characters in a database. And you can prove that that's a good idea that can allow people to communicate with very little amount of infrastructure and actually working. And arguably, people would say Twitter still doesn't scale, but yet it still managed to change the way we use the internet forever. So when you're making something, you don't need to worry about, is this marketable right now, or can I take this to 1 million users? Because you can prove that an idea is really cool and disruptive without making it this huge thing. You could learn to program in a week and make something really cool. You don't have to like be an expert in it to make something really neat. Make stuff that reflects the world you want to live in. Obviously, with Diaspora, it makes a lot of sense that we sort of said that things like Facebook and whatnot are not good for the internet, and they don't really promote innovation and whatnot. So we wanted to make a social network that did promote innovation and did let people have control over who they were connected with and where their data was hosted. But that is only kind of the surface, because in a way, we were almost making it so we could let people sort of build the world they wanted to live in. Because I don't necessarily want to be someone who tells you how you can share something. If you want to be totally private and not share anything, like I want to make it available so someone can make that option available to you. I think sharing is what makes the internet awesome, so I want something that respects the way I want to share, but I'm not going to tell you this is what you can and this is what you can't share. But the thing that I think that I was, one of my most proud moments, I guess, with Diaspora is that Sarah May also kind of got this feeling from us. And it wasn't necessarily because I told her, like, you should do what you feel, you should make sort of Diaspora what you want to embody the world to be about. But she's our #1 contributor, and actually I consider her one of my good friends now. And she did a really interesting thing, which actually was very different press for the project, but she actually changed gender to a text field. And that's, a one-line HTML change. It's not really like it's not like a technical decision, but I was really proud because, she was kind of continuing the spirit of making Diaspora and molding it into something that, reflected what she saw and what she wanted the internet to be. And, again, we're not the only people who think this way. Mitchell Baker did also talk about this billboard campaign. This one is right outside my office, and I'm absolutely tickled every time I step outside to go to lunch, just because I guess I just get like warm fuzzies inside. Another thing, so my 4th rule for making stuff is you already know the best people you will ever meet. These are my 4 founders. We're a bunch of goofballs, but I definitely, like 2 years ago, said to myself, man, I really wish I knew like 3 people that were really smart and interested in cool things and I could like collaborate with and work with. And not that long ago I realized, like, wait, the people I already talked to are totally interesting and smart and totally capable. And actually this next step is also kind of related to it. But the fact that ideas are sort of dime a dozen, that you need to give one away in order to think of a new one. I don't know if everybody's, I have this thing, maybe this is a Maxwell only kind of thing, but if I have a really cool idea and I'm thinking about it and I'm writing about it in my notebook, if I don't like tell anybody, then I just like sort of like loiter on this single idea for weeks and weeks and weeks. But, and I sort of like try to keep it safe sometimes. But I found that like the second you tell somebody else, you have like another amazing idea. And so combining those two is like that the best idea you've ever had is the one that the people you care about are also excited about. Small groups of teams can really do amazing things, and being able to collaborate with people, even at something as simple as just a silly idea for a weekend project is I think one of the most important things you can do. And getting feedback even from one other person or working with one other person, I think, will make any crazy idea you have much more real and much more tangible and much more sort of effective. There's one other thing I wanted to say on this slide that I've forgotten, but maybe we'll come back to it. So the other thing is that you don't need an invitation to create disruptive technology. This one I actually got from last week. This really awesome lady, Ariel Waldman, sort of co-opted this thing, which has kind of been floating around the internet recently, of get excited and make things. And I don't have her awesome slide because I couldn't find it, but it was get excited and make disruptively accessible things. And Ariel Waldman, I guess, considers herself a space hacker. She hacks space. I guess, and I'm going to totally do her injustice, so if she ever sees this, I'm really sorry, but I'm doing my best. But she loves space. And so at first she went and like got herself a job at NASA because that's what she thought she needed to do in order to like, explore space. But what she realized is that, you didn't have to work at NASA in order to explore space. And she kind of worked with people at a sort of community she set up called spacehack.org. And now with sort of people she's collaborated with across the world, she's created basically you can do the experiment of the first satellites that went into Earth for under 150 bucks. So you can send a weather balloon into space for, some nominal amount of money, and you can do these amazing things that, people didn't necessarily think possible. I think it's important to note that, kind of like the Twitter example, that things which are necessarily disruptive and amazing and embodiments of really big ideas are not necessarily super technically complicated or expensive, I think, and make sure that, no company or startup or me lets you think otherwise. This one's actually kind of software related, and so the idea is released early and often, but I think if I was making it more generic to hackery types, it's the idea of don't be afraid to call what you're building, a mansion when it's still under construction. But a guy named Reid Hoffman sort of has this quote of, if you're not embarrassed by your first release, you've waited too long. And I think along the same lines, too, there's some idea of if people call what you're doing a toy, then you're doing it right. I think it's this kind of thing that sometimes even I guess, have this penchant to kind of downplay what you've done, downplay what an idea you have can become. And I think that you need to go out and you need to get feedback on what it can become, but it's totally okay to say, I have created this thing, and this is only the first version, but it is out there now, and it is going to be amazing. And I don't know, I think a lot of times people are sort of, too bashful and unwilling to sort of say, this is going to be a big idea. I think you have to be excited about it, and you have to be able to convince people that it is a big idea, but I think it's an important thing. Number 8, have fun in what you're doing. If not, it shows. I think the one thing that people kind of ask me a lot, oh, how do you think you were so successful on Kickstarter? It's kind of a weird story. And I kind of tell them that, well, we were going to do it whether we got the money or not. We didn't do it to get a bunch of money. That wasn't in our sort of wildest ideas of what the vector space of what could have happened could have been about. And, we really just wanted to have fun and hang out with each other and, make some really cool stuff that we could, think about later. And this also shows because it makes it really easy to kind of sort of be obsessive about the thing you love to do. Another thing, actually, a guy named Will Shipley said at this code conf I was at last Friday, which really stood with me, was that the way you make awesome stuff is by not going out on Friday nights. And I think that's kind of true. Partially because it made me feel good about myself, because a lot of times I don't go out on Friday nights and I'm working. But no, it's kind of you have to, if you really love something, then that's all you want to do. You're sort of obsessed with it, and that's all you want to think about, and you're so excited about it, and you're so pumped that, it doesn't even matter. I'm doing okay. So 9 is also share the love. This one is I actually thought about taking this out because I haven't figured this out yet, so if you have any ideas for how I can abstract this to non-software people, because software people have a really easy out with this one. With GitHub and other code sharing communities, it's so easy as a programmer to sort of share these cultural artifacts and have them be relevant to other people. In a way, if you're making something that isn't code, it's not necessarily immediately obvious what makes it reusable and understandable and cool for someone else to use. I think maybe spacehack.org is actually a decent example in looking at how non-code-based things, how communities of people can sort of share information and make it really cool. But this is kind of an important part of the puzzle. They want to know. The kids want to know. They want to know how you did it. They want to know how you thought about it. They want to know how you can do it, and you got to go out there and you got to tell them. So. And same idea of you want to get into this scenario where the byproduct of what you're doing for yourself can inspire other people. So it's kind of cool, but in a way, Diaspora to me is kind of selfish in a way, only because I'm making it because I want it, and because I like making it, and it brings me joy, and it's fun to do, and I get to work with my friends. And it just so happens that so many other people are really pumped about it, and I'm really grateful for that. That's really weird, but you know, it's a really lucky situation. And there's actually one more bonus one, is that like you can't be afraid to fail. I think this is one of these things that is also kind of hard to do, and you know, not everybody can necessarily say that they can get in this position. I mean, I am kind of in this fortunate position of a kid who's just out of college, so the worst thing that happens to me is I go sleep in my parents' attic for a year after this, it totally tanks. But I think the important thing to say is, like, I didn't start out thinking any of this craziness was happen. You know, I just wanted to do some stuff with my friends. I just wanted to, you know, eat ramen in my friend's parents' basement and code. And I think that the key to that is that it's hard to fail when you're having fun. If you're just doing something you want to do, then your definition of failure becomes, well, I had fun. So that's all I got, and thank you very much for listening to me babble on. So I'm more than happy to take questions.
Yeah, if you have questions, you can come to the front. There's microphones down here. Brave man, go ahead.
Hello. First of all, thank you very much for this very interesting presentations, and thank you for giving this 10 your main lines to us, and I will use them for my work. But I have a question about this different open source networks. Do you work together with these other platforms? Do you know them? Is it something like a community of open source developers, or you all, or you just know about them about your Google News or something like this?
No, I know them all. At least I know the StatusNet guys really well. They kind of have a set of protocols, not to get all geek out on everybody, but they have a set of protocols called OStatus, and that's it's a really good start. It basically allows for sort of, it's an open protocol set for sort of open following of other people across websites. So it's very narrowly scoped. It doesn't do some of the other things. It's strictly sort of the Twitter style, like how do you follow another account on another website. A bunch of the websites, or excuse me, a bunch of the projects that I sort of featured on the page are OStatus compliant. There's actually a W3C working group that's kind of getting established. Actually, the Federated Social Web Conference is going to be here in Berlin in June. And we hope to sort of send one of the four of us to that conference. I mean, we hang out on IRC and, you know, kind of are talking to each other, but we're all kind of doing slightly different things. So the idea is we have to kind of make it in parallel.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
We'll take a question over here, please.
Hi, I'm Stefan. What I wanted to know is, are there any plans to include location into the messages and everything on Diaspora? And if not, what would you recommend to develop it and to get it in the core, maybe?
I'm sorry, I missed the last part of your question.
If you don't plan to include location from what you do right now, what would be your recommendation for developers to get it in the core maybe sometime?
Yeah.
To do it themselves? And
so the development of Diaspora is slightly chaotic, and the way we've kind of structured it among us is we're sort of, I don't know if any of you have beta accounts or seen it, is we kind of built the interface and the back end as this monolithic thing at first because we were a small team and sort of needed to like focus on a single kind of implementation of the protocol. But hopefully the idea is that we kind of abstract away our front end and our sort of interactions from the back end of like how do servers talk to each other and whatnot. And so basically there should be a very straightforward way to sort of make a location sharing based sort of layer on top of Diaspora, hopefully within these next months. Sort of our next push is going to be about having, you know, a million different ways that developers can integrate parts of Diaspora into their applications. They can build it completely on top of Diaspora. But it's a matter of we had to make it work in a single context and have people like it first, and then we're going to really, really focus really hard on making it easy for developers to make cool new things on top of it. So definitely, in a few months, it will be very straightforward to add location to Diaspora.
Thanks.
Thanks.
In here?
Okay, hello. Maybe I'm mistaken on this, but you're defining new protocols, are you?
Well, for instance, O-status is an established protocol using sort of 5 different technologies, I guess.
So why didn't you, for example, start out with XMPP? I mean, pretty much everyone who isn't on Gmail has an XMPP account somewhere else.
I mean, I don't want to go too much into it, but I mean, we did look at XMPP. I mean, we are not unaware of it. I think there is this whole peer group of O-status is not based on XMPP, and I think there's good reasons for it. And I think it's interesting. I've met a couple of people who designed XMPP, and it's an very interesting protocol. It's very, very powerful, and I even think it could be a possibility that it'll be part of Diaspora in the future. But it's very kind of, when you're in experimental phase, it's very rigid. So I think we didn't want to necessarily start, because if we found that we needed everything that XMPP had, then we can always go there in the future.
Well, it's XML, you can always extend it.
Mm-hmm.
But I just didn't realize why you're taking up the. I mean, it's work to implement protocols, and you already have XMPP parsers, for example, and libraries and clients and accounts. So isn't it much more work to build a platform, and meaning the software and the protocol at the same time?
I mean, it definitely is. I think we're not letting it hold us back, I guess. I mean, it's not going to be a project that's going to be done and, totally tied up and perfect in a year. It's going to be, it has to evolve how people want to use it. If people aren't using what we're doing, then it doesn't matter what protocols we support unless people love it and want to use it. And, and if it comes to the fact that like we need the protocol in order to continue to grow, then that's what we're going to do. But I'd rather the pain point be, too many people are using it if what we have isn't working in terms of technically rather than for users.
Okay. A closely related question, is your developer team, because you seem to be new at it, afraid of making some bad choices where you can't back out later on? Or is that...
Are we afraid of that, or?
Yeah. Has it already happened?
Yeah, I mean, it's always an experiment. I think the idea is when we work, we never get too
technical
far.
choices, not business choices.
Yeah, I mean, I think like we switched databases already that we were using. I mean, but ultimately, not to get too much into the software, I mean, it's a test-driven application. We can refactor it pretty quickly. It's pretty malleable. And I think that the technical choices we don't make are things that make us very rigid.
All right, after the quadruple question, we'll go over here.
Okay, hi. I'm sorry I've not been here on the beginning of this talk. Maybe you have talked about this. I'm wondering about your vision. What do you want to achieve, and really how are you going to achieve that? I mean, like, how is the Diaspora going to start from Facebook, for example? What are your means to siphon the people from Facebook where it's really convenient to Diaspora? Because from my perspective, building the infrastructure is really easy, but the content and the people that are providing you the value, that's the hard question. And
yeah, I mean, it's a very valid question. I think the first kind of point we're going to go after is that there are tons of websites that are online that are social. I mean, like, Facebook did not invent social interactions online, and there's obviously, 500 million people on Facebook, but there's tons of other social interactions that are happening around the web that are kind of these more kind of long-tail communities. Maybe they're forums, maybe they're small groups of people organizing on other pieces of software. I think part of our idea is that if we can get some of these smaller, dense communities to sort of start sharing relevant information in between relevant sort of small communities, then we're going to build it up from the ground up like that. We're not necessarily going to go after, the mainstream user base at first. I think we see a lot of value in connecting these smaller communities sort of one by one and kind of building the network slightly more organically and based around things people want to talk about and who they want to talk about it with.
Okay, last two questions here.
Yeah, hi. I also have a technical question, or rather a few of them.
Please have just one technical question.
Yeah,
then we can
if you want,
have
I'll be out there
It's
later.
one big technical question. So it's kind of the same question as before. It's about protocols, because we were trying to implement something that spoke Diaspora and had federation protocol. But well, for one, Diaspora decided to roll their own protocol, which isn't quite that specified, or actually it's not documented at all, or wasn't when we tried. So the official answer was, well, just read the source, and that doesn't really work. And now by limiting yourself to O status, you're basically excluding all the federation that's already exists. I mean, we have plenty of protocols for federating identity. We have protocols for federating statuses, as XMPP, for example. So do you have any concrete plans on getting the Diaspora based on some standard protocol that's already established before it's too late and we have 200 instances all speaking Diaspora, whatever?
I mean, I think that it is important that you know, it needs to work for people before we do all this work into infrastructure and changing. I mean, the reason why our protocol isn't documented is because it's really simple and we know we're going to change it. So we don't want people building things on top of it until we know it works for people. So
doesn't that run counter to the whole idea of a federated, distributed social network?
Well, if it doesn't work for users, then it doesn't matter how wonderful puppies and unicorns protocols it has. If nobody wants to use it, then we've wasted a lot of time building some complicated stuff that's not necessarily straightforward to make, but people don't want to use it. So we don't just try not to waste our time.
Thank you. Okay, last question.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, I think you're an inspiration not only technically but also in a social, or the way you've, with the crowdfunding, I think software has always been made from the top down by big corporations and from the grassroots by free software and stuff. And we used to call it shareware, now it's called crowdfunding. And it looks like it's sort of a new thing that's happening now. And do you think it's something that's starting now and it's going in the future, everything will be crowdfunded, and maybe with Flatter, do you think this is like the big way forward, crowdfunding?
I definitely think it's going to enable an interesting new pocket. I mean, I think one thing that it does is kind of gives you, as someone who's seeking crowdfunding, sort of justification that maybe you're onto something or not. I kind of think, you know, that's sometimes hard to do as a free software developer. Sometimes it's hard to know what to work on. I mean, sometimes you have something that you want for yourself, so you're going to build it, but maybe you want to build something that people want to use, and I actually think crowdfunding really is a great way to experiment, to say, like, do people want this? You know,
it's a form of democracy as well.
Yeah. So I think that it's helpful, and I hope that it has kind of inspired at least Kickstarter. I know certainly there's been lots of little products of things that have really sort of wouldn't have been possible if it didn't, you know, couldn't be tested before it kind of existed. It's kind of interesting. But I think that there's still going to be a place for maybe more traditional versions of funding and also for free software people. So I don't necessarily see it like, you know, destroying any venture capital markets or anything like that. But I definitely see it as kind of a new opportunity for people to kind of get started and see what they can do on, you know, sort of this amount of funds. Thank you.
Thanks. Another hand for Max.